I'm really excited for today's video because we're gonna do a paint with me session and I'm gonna have somebody paint with me. So I want you to grab a friend, a partner, somebody that you want to paint with, that you want to display a piece. It's gonna be a joined piece that'll look great together. It'll look okay separate, but it's gonna be so much more fun together. So I have Steven with me today. This is my hubby, and he's gonna paint with me. And I bet we're probably gonna see Charlie coming around, and he's gonna think he wants to paint too, but he's not gonna be allowed. Hi, baby.
Stop waffling and let's get cracking.
Told you. Here's Charlie.
Yeah, you think you're gonna paint, don't you? Oh, you're such a sweet baby. Yeah, I wish you could paint with us. You're almost like a human baby. I know.
All right, let's get going. This is a painting for beginners. So whether you're a beginner or not, you can paint this, have fun with it, add detail where you want to add detail, throw in another animal, throw in a different kind of sky. We're going to be working on two 16 by 20 canvases. They're not the gallery wrap canvases this time. Some other materials you'll need. Hi, Charlie. Some paint colors. So these are the paint colors I'll be using. Some of them can vary. You can change it up depending on how you're feeling or what you want to paint. But if you want a blue sky, I've got a few different blues so we can blend and have some fun with it. It's cerulean blue, light blue, and cobalt. So I think it's fun to mix your blues, but if you just want a solid blue, you could just choose one of your favorites and just paint the whole sky that way. You can do gradient, you could do sunset. Those are our sky colors. Then we're gonna need some white, and you can mix white into your sky. You're gonna want some browns. So the browns I have here, and black as well. I have burnt umber, raw umber, and raw sienna. And then there's little hearts in this painting. I'm gonna do mine pink. The painting that I found this from had red ones, but I like pink, so I'm going with pink. You're also gonna need some water jars. I like to have 2 per person so that you can wash your brush in dirty water and then clean it off, especially when you're switching colors, especially on the opposite ends of the color spectrum. And a couple paint palettes, 1 for each person, and a couple rags as well. The way you want to set up is the bigger bear or bigger person on the left side, and then the smaller one on the right side, or however you want to do it. Maybe a table to set things up. And don't forget to wear some painting clothes. Okay, I'm so sad to tell you guys this, but my original audio that I filmed for the full length of this video somehow did not work. So I'm doing a voiceover here. So I'm going to speed up parts of it that I think you don't need to see full time, like the real time. So just hang in there with me. We're going to start with the sky first. So whatever color you decided for the sky, bring that out, put it on your paint palette, and wake up your largest brush that you're going to use. You definitely could use a larger brush than what we're using here, which is just a 1-inch. You could go really as big as you want. If you want a 4-inch, 2-inch, if you have a 2 or 3-inch, go for it, because you're going to be able to cover your background much faster and you're going to have nice smooth lines. But we're using 1-inch, no harm in that at all. We're going to start with our darkest color at the top. And when you paint with this, I want you to make sure that you're going a little bit over the edge, not just covering the front of the canvas. You can paint the sides as well if you'd like, but definitely get it at least just past the edge, because then if you want to paint your edge black or something like that, you're not having to paint any of it on that curvy part of the edge of the canvas, which kind of shows when you look at the front of it. So that's your best bet. So I did speed this up a little bit. I hope you guys don't mind, but I just thought, what is most of value to you guys? So I hope that this is okay for you. Now you can work side to side, up and down. Usually when I do a sky, I go side to side, but it's a little different when you have someone painting right next to you. Can be a little bit of a challenge, but that's okay. I'm also imagining where my character is going on my page, and I want to make sure that I'm not, that I have all the colors showing that I want shown. So I don't want just this darker blue. I want to make sure I start implementing some of the other blues in there, especially that light one. Now, in hindsight, after looking at this piece, once it's finished, oh yeah, make sure your setup is good. There we go. We got it. No problem. And just make sure that your setup is good. Make sure that you are mindful of the colors. So if you use a dark blue and then you're going to be using a dark brown, maybe it's too dark. So looking at my piece afterwards, I think I would have liked to choose more light blue and have that the emphasis and maybe just a little bit of the dark blue. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're going along. The other thing is, now you can see I'm going side to side. Keep that brush a little bit wet. You don't want it dripping, but you don't want it dry, because if it's just moving dry back and forth, you're not going to be blending as well. So every once in a while I dip in my water, I add that to my paint to smooth it out a little bit, especially if you're using like a medium to high viscosity paint. That's just kind of a thicker paint. Then you're going to want, like, if it's called a hard body acrylic, that definitely needs water in order to get it to cover this amount of space. Unless you really want a thick background, hey, totally up to you. It's your art piece. Have fun with it. So I'm just going side to side. Make sure as you want to blend colors that you work while it's wet. Blend while it's wet. Do not wait till it's dry to bring in new colors, because if you do, if you wait till it's kind of tacky and not dry but tacky, then you're going to start lifting paint. So really start top to bottom. This size of canvas, especially when you're using a small brush like a 1-inch, you know, it takes a while to cover. So you can see it took us a while to cover this whole canvas. And if you don't blend it while it's wet, you're not going to be able to blend it easily. It takes a little more skill to kind of figure that out. You can do it after it's dry, but when it gets into that tacky phase, don't mess with it. Let it dry, wash your brush, use a blow dryer, make sure it's fully dry, and then go over it and create a new layer. But do not work in that tacky paint scenario. If you've ever done nail polish, and you know when you put on your nail polish, but then it's about to dry, but then you like mess with it, that's kind of what I'm talking about, that kind of tacky stage. So cover the whole canvas. We don't want any of that background showing. Well, this is the background we're creating, but that canvas, I don't want that underlayer of canvas showing. When I've seen paintings that are a little amateur, sometimes you will see that showing. And unless it's part of some kind of avant-garde contemporary piece where they want that, we're not going for that. So keep it simple, just cover the whole canvas and have some fun with it. And like I said, work while it's wet. Blend in those areas. So Stephen had a bit that he lifted, and so we had to dry it, and then you can see his paint palette there. We got a lot of that light blue left over, and that's okay. And he's just creating a new layer because he didn't like some of those texture brush lines showing. But again, he didn't want to go over that while it was tacky. Otherwise, he'd be pulling up paint, and that is no help. That is not going to be helpful for us. Look at him paint. Great job, honey. Don't forget to encourage the person you're painting with. Be supportive. And if you're right-handed and your partner is left-handed, it might be good to sit so that your arms aren't hitting the whole time. Once this is fully dry, again, you can blow dry it to make sure it's fully dry. You can take a piece of pastel chalk. Do not use oil chalk. That's like the crayon. Do not use a waxy type of oily pastel. This is something we want, a chalk-like pastel. So you could even use a chalk. Use something that's either similar color to like the brown, or a white would be okay too. So you're just making kind of this rounded line shape. It's our bear, and it's very simple. It's just make it the height that you want it, depending on maybe the height of each other. So if you're doing a family picture, then consider your height if you want to make it slightly accurate in some way, even though this is not realistic painting. People can know who it is just based on the height sometimes. So Stephen is taller than me, and so he's a bit taller, but not by too much. So I made myself not too much shorter than him. So we're drawing the outline of the body, which is that simple round shape, and then 2 ears. Don't make the ears too big or they will look like mouse ears, and then don't make them too much to the side because then they will look like monkey ears. Then we also drew on the belly, which is the same shape as the outer, and then the nose area, and that is kind of a rounded triangle shape. Now we're going in with just a raw umber. Wet your brush. So this brush, now we want something that's going to give ourselves a little more, something not too wide. And I like that it tapers. It just helps to get into some smaller spaces. So this is still a fairly large brush because we want something that's going to cover the space, but just so we have a little more control over our lines, and that we can make a smaller line if we want and a thicker line if we press harder. And yeah, this brush is pretty good. I was having some trouble with it because I don't know what was going on with it. It's a bit floppy. Also, this part's a little bit challenging when you're working really close to somebody. So I found that I was having a little frustration with it. The brush was just a little too soft, I think. So maybe a stiffer brush would be a bit better for this particular section. But we don't want to go too big. Just consider the spaces in between that you have to paint. If you go too big, it'll be hard to kind of manage those. So keeping our paint a little bit on the wet side, again, not dripping. We also don't want it to go see-through. We want it to cover the blue. So we want it to make sure it's like an opaque tone. Now you could mix a little bit of a medium brown, a light brown with it if you feel like this is too dark. I do feel like it was a little bit on the dark side. I think I would have liked to lighten it up a little bit, or like I said before, lighten up the sky a little bit. So let's speed this up a little bit. I do like to show you guys what it's like when we're painting it in real time, and then for each stage, and then speed it up so you can always go back, review certain parts of this video while you're working on your piece together. And maybe you're fast enough that you can paint real time along with us. You'll definitely want to pause though in between when you paint the sky to painting this part, because you do want that to dry when you're drawing on the pastel. What's nice about the chalk pastel is you can actually just brush it off, even with a really damp, clean brush, or even dry brush. And so I'm not really worried about covering it while I'm painting. It doesn't matter if you do, it's not a big deal. If you choose a color that's really different than the paint you're using, you're going to end up kind of bleeding it into your paint. So we're painting brown, and I used kind of a browny red tone, and it worked just fine. They work well together. If I used a green, that'd be a little bit more on the opposite end, but this brown is pretty strong as it is. It's not going to be messed around with too much. It's pretty strong. You could see I switched to my 1-inch brush that I was using before because that other one was frustrating me. I'm not really sure why, but it was just too floppy. It wasn't giving me doing the job that I needed it to do. I hope you guys are able to see this okay. Not too much of our heads getting in the way and all of that. My apologies. I'm still working on how to make the best setup for you guys. And I haven't done I haven't done any paint with me side by side couples painting. So did the best setup that I could for now, but open to suggestion and hopeful to improve in the future. The most important thing is to make sure you're having fun. This shouldn't be a stressful thing, and don't worry about making it 100% perfect. Just do your best, and they don't have to look the exact same. You know, the sky doesn't have to look the exact same. I mean, if you follow the same pattern together, like, okay, we're going to use this blue at the top and then come lower with this blue, like that's kind of the key thing. So once you finish the body, we're going to create kind of little rings for the ears so that we have space in the middle of the ear for a different color. So Steven's going to do it, and then you're going to see. He's going to start. So this is where the taper brush works really well, or use a smaller brush, and it gives you a little more control to get some thinner lines so that we're not painting the whole thing and then having to wait till it dries to do the next step. just going to start like little rainbows. Little arches. So lovely. Just do a little arch. You can make it thicker or thinner. Whatever kind of ear you want to make it. The fun thing too is you could make this a little more personalized by adding in certain unique things that maybe you're known for. Maybe there's something like in respect to your, your look that you want to add in. Totally go for it. Just have a lot of fun, and then you can decide whether you want to hang it up later. And worst comes to worst, you had like hopefully a fun time painting this and working together, and it's like when you work on a puzzle or something like that together. It's a calming, relaxing date night type of activity. And I like our piece, and so I do want to hang it up. It's going to be special to me. It does remind me of the moments we've had together, like the memory of the actual event together, and that's special to me. So in we come with some raw sienna, just straight up raw sienna. It does have a really good opaqueness, at least this one does. So if you're using transparent paints, you're going to have a hard time covering up that blue. If you want to use transparent paints, you're going to have to probably use a gesso, like a white gesso, to paint the bear, kind of the whole bear, and then paint over it with those transparent paints. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just use your raw sienna to fill in the ears. I'm using now a 1/4 inch angle brush. This is one of my favorite brushes. It gives me so much control. I can do thin lines. I can really get in there. Now, if you're having trouble with steadying your hand, you can see how Steven's got his other hand to help steady him. You can do this method. You can use your pinky. Depends on which side you're on, what paint is still wet, but you can use kind of your other hand to help steady yourself, to make sure you're getting a nice smooth line if that's what you're going for. He's going to get his other one in there. See how he's holding that wrist. Just laying or resting the other hand on your wrist can actually really help to steady your hand. Even more so if you rest that hand partially on the canvas somewhere. That can really help. I often use my pinky to steady myself. There, let's get nice and close, you guys can see. So yeah, that brown really looks dark, especially when you paint it on top of the blue, I find. Okay, you can see my palette. I've got 2 little dots of white as well that we will use later. But right now I'm still just sticking with my raw sienna, just pure raw sienna. And if you don't have a raw sienna, just use a medium type of brown, something lighter. Maybe even try mixing some white into a brown, some orange to kind of create this kind of warmer tone. Try blending some colors and see what you can do. If you blend too many colors, you're just going to get a kind of muddy gray tone. So just wash your brush and try again if that happens. And don't apply it to your canvas until you're happy with the color. So right now I'm just creating like these little dashes just to indicate fur, and it gives a fun little texture too. So you just kind of dot it along, and we're kind of framing the face with it. So we take it just about to the muzzle area. I'm just going to take it all the way down the side of the body. We're not painting on any arms or legs. We're keeping it simple. This is going to be easier. You might even be able to get your kids involved if you want to add them into the scene. Depends on how advanced you are, how confident you're feeling, how much fun you want to go with it. You could paint your whole family into it if you want, and whether you want to have them help you do that, whether you want to just do that yourselves, you each can, choose who you want to paint, or depending on your size of your family. So I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm just going to take one of my little piles of white, scoop a little white, and mix on my palette. And you can see I've created this kind of peachy light tone. And we're going to apply that to the muzzle area. So just fill that right in, right up to the edge of it. You can check with each other how you're doing. Help each other out. But yeah, just fill that in. I'm still using that 1/4 inch angle brush. It's a great one for getting those edges. And, you know, Steven's color is a little lighter than mine. That's fine. It's great to have a little variation between each person because, hey, this is my partner, my husband, not my sibling. So, you know, we look a little different. That's okay. He has vitiligo, so I was saying that his is lighter for that reason. But that's the unfortunate part about not having the original audio is you're missing out on some of that. And I'm a little upset because those are, you know, our memories, but it's okay. We have the image we created and everything, so hopefully this is still a value to you and hopefully it still works out all right in the end. Not everything works out the way you want it to. That's okay. At this point too, if your dark brown is dry, you can bring it right over that if you want to kind of make the muzzle a bit bigger, change the shape a little bit. I just don't want any blue showing, so I'm going to go right up to the edge and maybe over just a bit if I want to round it out a little more, change the shape a little bit. Certainly do that. Make it however you want. If you want a little more round, if you want it nice and big, smaller, have fun. I might tell you to have fun a lot. And if you're wondering why, because it's like, well, painting is fun. Hello. I've taught a lot of adults, and I don't know if you're an adult watching or a different age, but if you're an adult watching, you tend to get stressed out about things like this. And so I just want you to make sure you're just relaxing and accepting where you are. Like if you're not, even if you are someone that you deem as, you know, you deem yourself as an artist, well, okay, you might have a little more pressure on yourself, but if you're not, then why are you putting that kind of pressure on yourself? Okay, we're mixing with the raw sienna now. So I've just added raw sienna to that mixture. I don't want it to be pure raw sienna, so I'm mixing a little bit. You can go back and forth a little bit, add a little white, add a little raw sienna. Make sure that color is still wet, not getting gummy at all. So make sure you maybe need to add a little water, but I don't want it drippy. I could turn my palette to the side and it wouldn't be dripping. So that's a key component. So once I get a color that I'm happy with, I kind of want this golden kind of honey kind of brown. Well, I'm looking at bears right now, so I'm thinking honey. And you're just going to paint that over the belly. So that's our belly color. And this color I really like. So I'm using my tapered brush for this one, and it seems to be working out okay for this application. Fill it right in. And again, you can kind of change the shape of the belly a little bit within reason at this point. So if you need to make it a bit bigger or round it at certain spots, that works fine. Work cautiously when I go around the edge, and then when I'm in the center I can be a little more free. So you can see Steven starting with his edge so that he can focus on that edge and then be a little more free on the center. I could try it different ways and see what you prefer. Brush, brush, brush. Have some fun with it. Oh yes, we are. Till you cover it right up. So at first I was thinking, oh, I'll just paint just us. But then as I was going, I thought, you know what? Why not paint our puppy? So we haven't been able to have kids, but we do have a puppy. And his name is Charlie. And when I was working with this brown color, I thought I could paint him. So I decided to add him into the painting, only you're going to see he looks a little more like a hamster. And I decided to make him look different because he is a dog and not a human. So as much as he believes he is a human, because he is an Australian Labradoodle, and if you're familiar with that breed, they do act a little human in some way. So I am going to add a little Charlie that looks a little hamster-like, but he's our little bear. Our little bear, and I was just trying to think of how big to make him, and I made him pretty small. But I want to include him. And I decided to just go right in with the brush. If you're confident, you don't have to draw things on with the pastels. You know, you could just paint right onto this. If you're really good, you could probably just look at this painting and figure out how you want to paint it and do it a totally different way. But this worked for me. And 2 little ears. See, it kind of looks like a hamster, right? And so for him, I'm doing a little bit different color scheme, but the same process. So we're just adding in those different tones. You can layer it with different colors if you want. Add in glasses, add in lipstick, whatever you think would be fun to add in. So Steven's starting in with the birch trees. So to give it a little bit of space, environment, you know, that we're in a place, a space, we're putting it in this kind of outdoor environment, which makes sense for bears. And so we're going to do birch trees, and they look so nicely contrasted with this dark. It ended up being more dark than I planned sky. So using your tapered brush, what's fantastic about this brush is you can do tiny thin lines, and then you can do nice thick ones depending on how much pressure you put on the brush. So you can create a thicker line, and then you can create a thicker line just by going next to that line. When I'm creating a thicker line, unless I'm going really big, instead of going side by side towards that line, I bring it just over just a little bit, but overlapping, so I don't end up going way too big. So the other thing is draw or paint multiple trees and not the same size or same distance apart. You want it to look like it's in a real space, even though, you know, this is a very cartoony type of painting. But you're going to see how we create. So he's creating a nice thick tree to begin with. And then he's going to do a couple more. So because I have the little Charlie on my side, I'm going to do smaller trees a little bit just to balance the piece out. So let's say you have, you know, 1 child that you want to paint in, or maybe you have 3. So if you have 3 kids, you're probably going to want to put 1 on one side and then 2 on the other. And so the one that has just the 1 on the one side, to balance that out, maybe put more trees on that side or thicker trees. And then on the other side where you have the 3 people or bears, then you can do fewer trees. And if you have a really big family, like I grew up in a family of 9 kids, this project would probably need to be turned the other way, like horizontally. So if you have a really big family, you could maybe do a horizontal piece. So just turn the canvases, rotate them 90 degrees, and then you're good. You could do a piece and include everyone in the family. It could be really fun. An idea I just had is if you have maybe one of your rambunctious children, you could actually paint them in the tree. Now it's going to be a little more challenging. That's going to be if you're more advanced, but it's an idea. If you're not advanced, just a blob in the tree might not be great. So a brown blob might not look so great. But if you can paint some arms and legs and the bear in the tree, like that could be really cute. So if you do that idea, make sure you tag me on social media at KMOArtYYC. I want to see that. Again, that's at KMOArtYYC. All right, so you can see he's creating a skinnier tree now because we want to create that sense of space and all of that stuff. So if you don't do that, then it's going to look really not real. We want cartoons to be real to some extent. We want some things to make sense. Like, okay, they don't have any arms and legs showing, but they still make sense to us in some way. And there I go. I went really quick, throwing on those 2. So I'm doing 2, he's doing 3. I like to have a balance of odds. So if he's got 3 on that side, then I don't want to have 3 on my side. So that's how I like to do it. That doesn't mean you can't do another way. I just don't want that to be totally symmetrical because, a grove of trees is not symmetrical. So not in nature anyways. So then I'm deciding which one I'm going to make a bit thicker. I don't want, if you're doing 2 trees on one side, you don't want them to be the same thickness. The thicker one is demonstrating a tree that's closer. And you're going to want to make your branches, make them thinner than the trunk. That's a key component because typically when you look at trees, you're going to see that the branches are thinner. It's okay if you make them a bit thick, but the key thing, listen up, are you listening? Is the angle. The angle matters far more than the thickness. Of course, we don't want to make them too thick, but see the angle. They're going up less than 45 degrees from your trunk, okay? Do not take it wider than a 45 degree for this type of tree. And in trees in general, typically, you don't have 45, going wider. Because if you start bringing them out to that horizontal, don't do horizontal. If you bring it to a horizontal, that's when it really looks not real. And it's terrifying. Now, don't be afraid to overlap a tree branch over top of one of the tree trunks. Just like you've seen Stephen just did that one over top. That is going to make it look more realistic. Look how it did. Don't you think when you look at it, it's like, oh yeah, that looks great. 2 of mine are meeting at a point, which isn't a problem. I'm not worried about that. I'm not mad about it. I just didn't want mine to look too similar to his either. So that's another thing to consider. So these are birch trees. So we just painted them white. And then we're going to add little bits of black. But I like to use color at the same time when possible. So there's black components for the eyes and the nose and the mouth for the bears that we need to do. So let's do those now. I'm going to use my 1/4 inch. You can use a round. You can use, if you want to be really round, and sorry, you can't see it because the black is so similar to the dark brown from this angle, and this lighting and everything, but they are visible, and we are going to make them a little more visible with a little shine, a little white shine, just keeping it simple. So just a little round, or you can make them bigger, make them a little beady black eye. You can add, like I said, glasses. You can make them a colored, add the iris of your color of eye. Like I have blue eyes, I could have added blue. If a simple way to do that is, let's say you have blue eyes, you want to implement that. Instead of doing black and then a ring of blue around, do a big blue circle and then do a black circle inside that. Okay, we're doing a cute heart nose. This is so very cute. It's very cute. We're creating 2 dots close together, and then when you bring them to a point just below in the center, it creates a heart. So that's a simple way to create a heart, just 2 black dots, bring them in to a point below, make them as big as you want. So Stephen decided to do the outline way. It was funny because when we were painting, I was saying, okay, this is how you can do a heart. And I said not to do, like, if you do an outline, you might make a heart really big. And it was cute because he didn't listen to that, and that's okay. His heart turned out really great anyways. And so I'm happy with the turnout, with the outcome. You can, like you said, like his muzzle part is bigger anyway, so it actually works. And mine was smaller. I mean, his nose isn't like a lot bigger than mine or anything, but and then I decided on Charlie that I would paint a little pink nose. As I said in the beginning, I'm going to be painting pink hearts, and so I'm going to paint his nose pink. But before I do that, I'm going to finish off my little heart. Make sure that it's ready to go before I go on to that. And then you could use this brush to draw the line down that attaches to the mouth. But the little smile, I would use a different brush. This is a thinner brush called a script liner brush. The bristles on it are long, but there aren't a lot of bristles. That gives it lots of fluidity and movement. It's easy to kind of create a smooth, longer, thin line. So wet your black paint almost to an ink, and then gently, see how I'm using my pinky? Slide it into a smile, and I practice my line before I go in because I want to know what my, I need to tell my brain, okay, this is how long I want my line to be. This is where I want it to end. And then if you want to make it happy, make it happy. If you're a grumpy person, you want to make it grumpy. That's totally up to you. If you want to do a laughing face, I mean, there are no limits here. This is art. You could do a little tongue sticking out, like have fun with it. Always. So I wasn't sure what color to do with the nose while I was thinking about it. So before I went ahead with the pink nose, I made the little mouth for Charlie too. I think at the time I was thinking maybe I would do a tongue, but I never did. Maybe I should go back in and paint a little tongue. And that's the thing. Once you finish the piece, you can actually go back in and still add things to it. You don't have to do it all in one sitting either. Like if you feel like, let's work on the background and then we'll do another date night and work on the next bit. Just depends on your schedule. And I only have one ink liner brush, so we took turns. So Steven did his after me. Make sure you do wash your brushes when you're not using them. Don't leave them sitting in water. Don't leave them sitting to dry because acrylic paints dry quickly. So now I'm just taking that script liner brush and adding tiny little white dots that you can barely see from the camera. But it makes all the difference because it's so dark on dark that having that little white shine helps you to actually see that there are eyes. You can kind of see it if you're really observant. Again, we're taking turns getting use out of that script liner brush. It's a fantastic brush. When I got it, I was like, wow, how did I ever live without this brush? Amazing. So I was using a reference photo. I've actually found this on Pinterest, by the way. You can find so many treasures on Pinterest still to this day. I utilize it. It's a wonderful thing. Okay, going back to my ink liner. Hello. Back to my 1/4 inch angle brush. You can get angle brushes that are larger, but I love the 1/4 inch. I also use the 1 inch or 3/4 inch one. That one's very helpful for larger paintings as well. So I'm just imagining where those hearts are going to be. We want them to kind of work side by side with our paintings. Think about that. We want is it creating a line of motion? So that's why I'm thinking about that. And I'm going to use the same method I did to paint the nose, to paint these pink or magenta, whatever word you want to use, hearts. And also how big do you want them to be? So I'm doing a smaller one, and then Steven's going to do a couple on his side. And when you're using an angle brush, I turn it and use the tip to make a round, like little round dot. It's just a bit easier to get it round when you're using kind of the tip of that angle turned around. So kind of backwards how you'd think you would use it. And it is backwards than how I would normally use it to like make a line. Bring your edges into a point and you have a heart. It's a really easy way to paint a heart. So now I'm also painting a little heart on Charlie's nose. Part of our family, but you can see he does look like a hamster, right? Oh well, what can you do? It is what it is. I'm also going to put little shines of white on the heart, but I'm going to make those shines follow the curve of the heart. and I'm going to keep it on the same side of the page that I did the white dot on the eyes. So I kept it in the top left corner of the bear's eyes is where I did them. So that's where we're going to do them on this one too. Now, because we're painting like pink on top of blue, you might need to layer it a little bit, add a little more pink once your heart dries a little bit, just to enhance that opaqueness. I was thinking whether I should add some hearts above Charlie's head, but then I thought, you know what? I think that's going to be too much. I don't want it to look cheesy. Okay, it's a little cheesy, right? But there's even limits to the amount of cheese that I would like. I know, it's shocking. It was such a joy to watch Stephen paint and to paint side by side with him. You can feel the energy of the people beside you, and that's a really cool thing about painting with someone rather than on your own. On your own, it's your own energy, maybe, any spirits around you. But when you're with someone, you're that close to them painting too. Yeah, it's a really cool experience. So if you haven't tried it, hopefully you're trying it. You might be just watching this, but if you actually haven't tried it before, I encourage you to give it a go. Find someone who's willing and go for it. Get the materials you need. I like how he made one heart kind of turned on its side, and then one heart more like up and down. Now Charlie's right here whining at me because it's evening time, and he's like, "Hey, Mom, why aren't you sitting with the family now? You're throwing off our schedule." Oh, Charlie. Yeah, Mommy painted you. Do you see? Yeah, I did. It's good to make sure your brushes are clean. So Stephen was just getting his brush nice and clean. So I go into my dirty water first, and then I have my clean water. So what I mean by dirty water is not like I get dirty water initially. It's just that I have 2 jars, and I always go into the first jar, so that one ends up being dirtier. So that's why I call it the dirty jar, like dirty water. Next, I'm going in with my 1/4 inch angle brush, and I'm going to create these little lines, little dashes, randomly along and horizontally on the birch trees. And you don't have to do it the same as each other. Like, it's okay to have some character in your piece by making them a little bit different. But I am trying to make it, I'm not following a pattern exactly, but I am, okay, some on this side, some on that side, and then some in the middle. And I find it really fun because it's so random with them. And go up the branches as well. So you want to make sure you take this method up the branches. And I mean, the trees aren't the focus of the painting, right? So we don't want to do like intensive labor work on these trees versus our bears, because our bears, those are the focus of the piece. But we also don't want them to look terrible enough that they distract, right? So we don't want them to be the focus. We don't want them to be the deterrent either. Making little brush marks all along. Some thicker, some thinner. Keep it varied all throughout. Yeah, you don't want them all on one side and not the other of the actual branch or trunk. You want it all kind of in different areas. Just brush along, brush along. I sometimes kind of add them, I kind of create the whole space throughout and then go back in and see where I need to add more. That's a nice way to make sure that you don't, if you start the bottom and do like a lot and then you realize you did too much, you can't really go backwards from there. Or you can, but it's a little more challenging. Once you're finished this part, we're going to sign the painting. So we're actually so close to being done this piece. Super exciting. And you might notice that I haven't removed the chalk yet, but I want my painting to be dry before I do that. So Steven's signing. I signed, but I'm going to sign a little bit more on top so that I have a lighter tone. So you can see he did his initials. You can decide, we were deciding where we should do them. You know, should it be, you know, on the outside edges? And then we decided, let's do it on the bears. So I'm doing my little initials. I'm using that script liner brush. Isn't it fantastic? I personally love it. There we go. And Charlie didn't sign his. So now I'm using a dry brush to sweep off that chalk. And if it's not coming off well enough, use a clean, slightly wet, so damp brush. So there we go. I used a damp one. And it cleans it off even better. All right. Okay, you guys, what do you think of our finished piece? I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you love your piece and that you're going to put it up. We had so much fun. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to see your piece. Share it with me on social media at KmoArtYYC. If you did complete this piece, I'd love to see what you put together and if you made it a family or how you made it different. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye now.